Full name is Donna Kim Murphy. Kim is my maiden name. I was born in Houston, Texas in the late 70s. I grew up in Northwest Houston. It's a suburban community that has really exploded, I think, and changed demographically over the years. And I think it was quite different moving from that community into the community where I attended middle school or junior high. So for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I actually was in a school that was very diverse, very large Asian American population, predominantly Vietnamese American. Again, I think there was maybe one other Korean student in the school, apart from my own sibling. I went to Harvard undergrad for 4 years. It was the only time in my life that I've actually lived outside of Houston. Then came back to Houston and took a year off between medical school and undergrad. I think after my first year of medical school, there was a gentleman who came into the classroom who was a physician scientist, and he suggested to us that we all entertain the possibility of taking a year off to do some scientific research during our medical training. And at the time, I thought it would, I mean, he sold it this way also, that it would make me more competitive for residencies, right? I took the opportunity to actually do that year and decided, I think 2 or 3 months into doing research in neuroscience, that I actually really loved neurobiology, and that I probably wanted to do a full PhD in that. And so I applied, got in kind of through the back door into our MD PhD program. I had started off as an MD candidate, and yeah, completed that full program after 8 years I graduated. And you know, this is, I think, something that I've struggled with my whole life, is like kind of what I see for myself versus what I'm told I should do for practical reasons. And so I decided that I should listen to the advice that people seem to be giving me about continuing my medical training so that I would be, it would be possible for me to actually practice clinically if I chose, right, in the future, even though that's not the path that I intended to pursue. So I made my way through that, kind of slogged through the clinical training, got a research award during that time, had my whole design for what the next 10 years of my life would be, and then ran into a situation where I was not able to negotiate a favorable position. It actually wasn't obvious to me as I was going through the process of negotiating this position, but as I stepped away from the whole situation where I ultimately declined the offer and had conversations with other people in the department and also other people negotiating positions to be in the department, that some of this had to do with me being a woman in science. And I really kind of was second guessing myself in that moment. Like, maybe this is what I'm worth. And it wasn't actually until he said to me, if you don't take my offer, he put it out there, if you don't take my offer, what option do you have? Like, what other option do you have? And in that moment, I was like, there's no way I am taking your offer. It was the first time in my life where actually I really did feel like an aspect of my identity was actually really a barrier to me doing something that I wanted to do in my life. And I didn't realize it, because I never thought about the world in that way. I never, even like my Korean American identity, right? Children would tease me, they would say things, but I never saw it as like an impediment. I thought this is no different than people teasing me about some physical feature or like some, I didn't see it as anything other than that, like as a kind of systems level issue, right? And it wasn't until this moment, like fully into my adulthood, where I was really then grappling with this possibility that maybe I wasn't given the opportunity that I deserved because of who I was. It was actually the 2016 election, and I think it wasn't just me who was going through an identity crisis. I feel like the whole country was kind of going through an identity crisis with this very contentious political election, with this kind of these new social norms of being able to say whatever you want, no matter how that makes people feel. That was also maybe the first time that I really started to think about my immigrant identity and my other identities, actually, not just my identity that had become known to me, like in a very, like I said, in a very jarring way, my gender identity. All of this, like I never really intentionally or consciously engaged with those things growing up. And it wasn't until, I think everything became very politicized, and I think, I don't know, it was kind of traumatic those years in many ways, very difficult, very challenging, that I really started to kind of examine those things about myself and my heritage, where I felt I belonged. What kind of agency I have and actually creating belonging. One of the things that like I always go back to, I had this conversation with my parents when I was 16. I remember it so vividly. What they said to me is like, we came to this country, with our own beliefs and our own cultural practices. But we realized that some of those things were very particular to where we came from. And you were born in this country. And so while some of those things may still be pertinent to who you are and where you are, some of those things are not relevant anymore. And so your charge is to really figure out like what it is to discard and what it is to move forward with, right? And that, I think, was like the most empowering thing that really anybody could have said to me. And I think that too often children don't hear that message from their parents. It's often, I think, very paternalistic. Like, you do what I say you do because we've always done it this way. It has just, throughout my life, it continues to inform like how I think about myself, how I think about the world. And I think it's really kind of reassuring, right? Both that I come from something, right? Like that I have a history and that has meaning and it informs who I am, and that I have the agency to kind of create my future. So I think that, if you had to like say there's one thing that if you can invest in this one thing, ultimately it will be the solution for all of the problems we have, I think education is it. What I see, for instance, happening in Texas and also like across our country, I don't know if it's happening globally, but it's certainly happening in the United States, where there's this move to like deceive people about history, right? To erase histories of people. I think that's super problematic. Like, it's the whole thing of like, when I described this thing that my parents shared with me, right? It's like understanding like what works and what doesn't anymore, right? Understanding the legacy of like the past, right? That is so crucial to like not reproducing the same mistakes and the same harms. And unfortunately, I feel like there's definitely, I think, a movement to do that, to kind of erase those things. So if I could, if I'm going to be invested anywhere, I think like that is where I would really most like to see change and to help make change. For the first time in my life, I haven't been able to like continue to exert myself and like leverage my ability to just not sleep in order to produce in every aspect of my life. And, have realized that I have to focus my energy because I don't have an endless source of it, right? It seemed that way before, but like I don't have that. So when I really think about like what I value, it is the work that I was doing on the side. It's all those things. The reason I pursued those things is because I thought they gave my life purpose. And I didn't feel that I was getting that in the work that I was doing, that I was trained to do, right? Yeah, so in 2019, I actually ran for public office myself. I live, as I said, in Brazoria County. It was time for somebody from our community to kind of step up and represent our interests. And I had been doing a lot of immigrants' rights advocacy at the time that actually a couple of years before I decided to run for office. And then we had a lot of immigrant families that started to move into that area. So we have a lot of Latino families, and the Asian Americans in Pearland, which is a city in Brazoria County where I live, we are about 3 times the percentage Asian Americans in the state of Texas. So in Texas, we're about 4 to 5% of the population here. In Pearland, Asian Americans comprise about 12%. I think that where you have so much diversity, and I think also an awareness of the value of that diversity. There is just so much potential for things to emerge in those contexts that are just so incredible and so beautiful. And I don't think that potential gets realized in communities where you don't have that diversity, or where you have communities from different parts of the world, but they aren't engaging in ways that are challenging, right? And in Houston, I feel like we're having difficult conversations. We have so many different communities. There's like, I don't know the number of people, like the countries, the faith traditions, the languages, the cultural backgrounds that are represented here. There are so many, right? And I just think that allows for so many incredible things to happen that are not necessarily possible in other contexts. But I think that the people and the diversity, and not just the diversity, but kind of the inclusion of people in like, well, first of all, like power here, which I think is a representation, I think is really actually crucial to realizing that all that potential that I'm talking about, right? It cannot be the case that it's like we're still talking about like 1950s, like cultural appreciation weeks, or, like that cannot be it. Like we have to like recognize the full humanity of all of the communities with which we like share space. That potential is just such an amazing thing to me. I think it keeps me here. My name is Donna Murphy, and this is my Korean American story.